My Gavan and Melanie, and well met indeed. I'm Aragorn Galadurthan, and welcome back to the channel. Joined today again by Hyganel, and we're going to discuss the Two Towers. We're also joined by Tara and Calame, but you can't see her because she's gone to bed. So, we are talking about the Two Towers today. We've watched the Two Towers as we did with the Fellowship. Jess had a number of questions, and we're just going to discuss them. So, without any further ado at all, I should just state, this is all just off the top of my head, and it's just for a bit of fun. You're not probably going to learn enough in this video to complete an essay or a lecture on Tolkien, so please do bear that in mind if you do watch along. That'd be grand. All right, fire away with the first question.
Hello. So my first question is, how old is Gollum? You took a drink just then.
What a good question. Gollum is quite aged. He's at least 500 years old, and I believe he's just coming up to 600.
600.
And most of those years are, of course, extended with the lifespan of the ring. I think he gets the ring when... Oh, no, that I don't know. I think he gets the ring when he's about 40 or 50, but he could be a little younger. But he's about 600. So, yeah, he's quite old, and he spent most of that time as the Gollum that we know, unfortunately, and not as Smeagol. And
is Smeagol a hobbit?
Yeah, so he's a Stoor. One of the three types of hobbits. He's the Stoors are the most like, or rather, the hobbits don't really like water, but the Stoors are the ones that can abide it, and they do actually sail and all that kind of stuff. Which in the film, actually, Aragorn references when he says that Gollum was too clever a waterman, and that's just a little nod to the fact that the Stoors are happy to go in the water, whereas the other hobbits, the Falahides and the one I can't remember, they don't like water. And as we mentioned, Frodo's parents drown in a boating accident, and that's all just builds into the mythos that the one thing hobbits generally don't like is water. But Smeagol's people are happier on water.
Okay. Why does Gollum know the way to Mordor?
Because he was captured and taken to Mordor and then released, so he's been before.
So just that one journey means he knows all the way back?
Well, and I think he might have gone through the Dead Marshes on his own at a certain point as well. And he's visited Mordor a number of times because he does have some sort of quasi-relationship with Shelob, and not in a lover way. But he knows of Shelob, and he sort of has an almost unwritten deal where he brings things to her and she can then eat them and he gets to take what he wants from it. So he's been to Mordor a number of times.
Okay. When did Saruman turn away from his mission?
He turned away at a sort of unknown point in the study of the ring. So he went into the east when he arrived, and he went out to the land of the Easterlings, and he mulled around there, and then he came back and he was gifted Orthanc and by the steward of Gondor at the time, and then he stayed in Orthanc, and that's when he started getting deep into ring lore. And at some point in his studying of the ring, he came to the conclusion that he could use the power for himself. And then, of course, eventually he then starts talking to Sauron, and that just cements the downfall. But it's just his own greed and his own power-hungry nature makes him think, I've studied this as much. Actually, I think I'll be able to control this, so I'm going to just take it myself.
I'm going to skip forward to another question where I think I've asked, what is Orthanc?
Oh, yeah. So Orthanc is the name of the tower itself. So Isengard is like the place, and Orthanc is the tower in the middle. So it's often called the Ring of Isengard, and the tower is called Orthanc. And that's just the name of the tower. It means... I can't remember off the top of my head, sorry. It's funny because it means something in Sindarin that it also, completely coincidentally, means the same thing in Rohirric, which is one of those little interesting tidbits. I think it means something like tall fang. That's what my gut says, but I just can't recall. But anyway, Orthanc is the name of the tower, and Isengard is the name of the place.
I'll look it up and I'll put it on the screen if it's wrong.
I'm sure it's tall fang or sharp fang, something like that.
Okay. I'm just going to state... I have a very scratchy throat, and Galley's going to say it's because I'm drinking Pepsi Max, but it's not. I have a scratchy throat, so I keep clearing my throat, but it's not because I'm drinking Pepsi Max.
Other beverages are available.
What are the two towers?
No, I'm being rude. The two towers are Minas Morgul and Orthanc, but people think it's Barad-dûr and Orthanc, but it's not. It's Orthanc and Minas Morgul. Tolkien tells us that himself, but it generally, I mean, I wouldn't care if you thought it was Barad-dûr. Of course you'd think it's Barad-dûr, but it isn't. It's Minas Morgul. So those are the two towers that the book's actually named after, because in the book, Minas Morgul and Orthanc are the two sort of primary antagonists. We haven't really crossed into Mordor yet. So that's why Minas Morgul is a more focal point. But in the film, they go with Barad-dûr, and why wouldn't you? It's more iconic, and when you've got limited time, you'd focus on on the bigger picture rather than the minutiae. So yeah, but yep, there you
go. Who swears their allegiance to Saruman?
They're Dunlendings. So in that scene in the film, it's the Dunlending who cuts his hand and is like, "We will fight for you." The Dunlendings, when Rohan became Rohan, so Rohan originally was part of Gondor, and it was loosely controlled by Gondor, like very loosely controlled. And then the Rohirrim fought with the Gondorians in ages past, and they turned what was going to be a surefire loss into a victory. And the Gondorians rewarded them. So at that time, they weren't called Rohirrim, they were called the Eored. Or the Eotheod, actually, sorry. And they came down from the north, and the Gondorians gifted them Rohan, but with the slight little irritation being that there was a group of people that already lived in Rohan, and the Rohirrim forced them out, and they moved up to Dunland, which is north of Isengard, and they became the Dunlendings. So that's where their sort of bitter rivalry comes from. They were just forced out. And those are the people that Saruman does use in his armies, because he knows they already hate the Rohirrim, so why would you not take that free anger?
Did the Ents used to roam all of Middle-earth, or just Fangorn Forest?
No, so originally they roamed the whole world. They were literally put on the world to protect all forests. And they reproduce, we assume in the same way humans did. There are Entwives and Ents, and they have Entings, which is just fancy for Entsex.
I think we call it Entlings.
No, Enting is the event, is the action.
Oh, like
that's
intercourse.
Not the name of the So and then it's generally accepted, although I don't think Tolkien's written this himself, or he may have done, and that's what I'm not too sure. But north of Mordor is a place called the Brown Lands, and in the Brown Lands there's nothing. It's a dead wasteland, and that's because it used to be a giant forest, part of Greenwood the Great, and Sauron burnt it to the ground in age gone by, and the general theory is that that's where the Entwives were at the point that forest was burnt down, and that's why there are no more Entwives anymore.
And they can't find them or remember
and
where
they
they
can't
left them.
find them. So because there haven't been any Entings for a long time, there's no smaller Ents, so the Ents are naturally dwindling. There's no women left, so they can't reproduce, and that's why they've slowly then restricted themselves to Fangorn Forest.
How long do Ents live for?
Oh, hundreds of years, thousands of years. Immortality, I think, actually.
Like trees.
Like trees. Well, they're like, because they're mystical beings, when an Ent sort of dies, as it were, they don't really die, they just become a tree. So they lose their sentience as they wither away. So, but they live for literally thousands. I think Treebid has been alive since the beginning. But again, that... off the top of my head, I've not read about Treebid's origin, but I'm sure he's been alive if thousands of years is a minimum, but if not, potentially forever. But I don't think they do live forever. I just think they live for a really long time.
Is that why when Treebid is then waking up the Ents because they're becoming less sentient? So
yeah, exactly that. So
them.
The Ents all sort of dying away and turning into trees is very much part of the theme of the War of the Ring, that all of the magic is kind of leaving the world. The elves are fading away, they're going away. The dwarves dig deeper and deeper underground, so they become less a part of the world, and then the Ents slowly become trees. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind being an Ent. I'd be an Entwife. I wouldn't mind being a tree.
Very boring existence.
Eventually, no, but rather than dying, I wouldn't mind becoming a tree.
I'd rather die.
Oh. Well, that's nice and morbid.
Who wants to live forever? You get bored.
I didn't say I wanted to live forever. I said I wanted to become a tree.
All right.
But then you're useful.
Yeah. All that oxygen you're pumping back into the world.
Yep. Why is Fangorn Forest so notorious? When did it change? Because it can't have always, but because we saw in the Rings of Power that Fangorn Forest, which we think they were in, was not scary. And then it was becoming scary.
So Fangorn has gained its notoriety pretty much since the founding of Rohan, because obviously Rohan borders Fangorn Forest. And the Ents are distrustful. They've long since withered, or the process of withering has begun. And they are growing distrustful of pretty much all living things. And why wouldn't they? Even humans chop down trees. So every living thing is almost an enemy of the Ents. And over time, that's bred within them and that contributes to their withering. But it just means Fangorn Forest is not a safe place. So pretty much since the founding of Rohan, when they first started interacting with the forest, they realised there's something in there that's more than just trees. We should probably ignore it. And then so over then the hundreds of years that follow, that becomes cemented as the...
So Fangorn,
folklore.
So Fangorn has always been a bit dangerous.
Only since the Ents have sort of been restricted to it, but we don't really know when that took place. For our, again, it's one of those things Tolkien doesn't explain. So for our purposes, Fangorn, for the story, has always been known as mysterious ever since it's been mentioned. So like the first time Tolkien mentions Fangorn Forest, it's already notoriously a dark place. We don't know what Fangorn was like before it was a dark place, because that's not... There's just too much that Tolkien didn't write about.
Okay. Why didn't the ring race start out on the fell beasts?
Oh, they do, but they don't in the film, so that it like heightens attention.
Right. Okay. So they go out immediately on. Some of them go, or they all go out on their fell beasts.
Well, at least some of them do. At the end of the first book, Legolas shoots a fell beast.
Oh.
But they don't do it in the film. So, and yeah, in the film, it's to heighten the tension, isn't it? It's like, oh, last time you saw them on horses, and now they're on flying beasts. But they're on flying beasts from the beginning. They just didn't use them. Although when they set out from Mordor, they do... Initially, they try and do it in secret, so they don't want to draw attention to themselves. But by the end of the first book, they're already then using the beasts when they know something's going on. The ring is somewhere and someone's got it. They're no longer too worried about the secrecy, and they just want to get it back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What's so special about Gandalf's horse?
Shadowfax is a meras, which is sort of like a mythical horse. So they're like horses plus. They're descended from... so again, going all the way back to the Valar. The Valar all ascribe to like a Greek god theory. So you've got like the god of the sky, the god of fate, and the god of the stars, that kind of thing. They're not gods, I know, but it's easy to describe them that way. And Arome is like the huntsman of the Valar, and he has a very special horse. And the horses that are bred from his horse became the meras. So they're like god horses, basically. And Shadowfax is just the latest one in a long line of these like extra special horses. So you can't saddle Shadowfax with a saddle, which the film actually does do. If you ever notice, Gandalf never uses a saddle because the meras are sort of... They're more intelligent than horses. You can talk to them. You can interact with them. They can't talk back at you, but they can understand you. So they're that just kind of... a concept that appears in a lot of fantasy of just like intelligent horses. And that's what they are, basically.
So do they just not get tired that quickly?
Yeah, so yeah, he's just a better
faster.
version of a horse. Yeah, he can run quicker, he can run for longer.
Stronger, I
He's
imagine.
stronger. He's not as fearful as other horses. So they're just a horse plus, and they're descended from like a god's horse.
What's your favourite phrase?
Well, it just describes things so well, doesn't it? I'm going to use it again when you ask that Númenórean question.
We haven't got there yet. How many Ents are there, and where did they come from?
So we don't know how many there are, but they, like the dwarves, they are created by one of the Valar, and then Eru allows them to take life. So Yavanna, the god of nature, or the goddess of nature, sorry, she creates the Ents, and she has a bit of an animosity towards the dwarves and Aule, because she knows that Aule's dwarven creation. So the dwarves come first, and because Eru grants them life, Aule creates them, but he can't give them life, and then Eru does allow them to have life. And Yavanna sees these dwarves are going to wreak havoc on my forests because they're going to be all about smithing and all about fire and all about creation, and they're going to chop down my trees. So she creates something to protect her trees, which are the Ents. So the Ents came second in answer to the dwarves almost. And yeah, Yavanna and Aule are probably the two. They don't hate each other, but they don't. I don't imagine they go out for dinner very often.
Don't always see eye to eye.
No, they're in the same friendship group, but like they're the two that if they were on their own, they wouldn't really have a good time.
They wouldn't text each other individually to say, let's meet up.
No, definitely not.
I feel like I had another question about Ents somewhere.
Well, that's right. If we get to it, we get to it. Okay. Just go down the list.
Moving this one up. So how long was Theoden corrupted for?
So the Theoden corruption's a bit tricky because he's not corrupted as extremely as the film makes out. He's not turned into a dwindling little man. He's just whispered. Grima just whispers lies and untruths in his ear. So he's just led badly. And with the purpose being that Grima's meant to sow discord in Rohan. So it's not that Saruman controls Theoden completely. It's that Rohan is there's so much different information and misinformation that they're just not able to help when they should be, which allows Isengard to build up their army without Rohan doing anything. And Eomer and Theodred both realise that they're in a really difficult position, and Grima works his skills to try and stop Theoden helping Eomer and Theodred. So that's the actual corruption, and it's not very long at all. So the lifetime of Grima, really. Theoden doesn't really start to become coerced until, obviously, Grima falls to Saruman. So it's not very long at all. Maybe 30 years, maybe not even that. 20 or 15 years.
Is Theodred his son?
Yeah.
My next question was, when does Grima get corrupted?
Yeah, so Grima gets corrupted at an unknown time. We just know that he does get corrupted, and the way in which he does that is, number one, Saruman is a powerful magician, and he has a very powerful voice, so he can command people to do his will. So a part of it is Saruman just bending Grima to his will, but also he promises Grima Éowyn when Saruman beats Rohan. And Grima covets Éowyn. That part of the film is correct. And so that's how he gets him. It's part magic and it's part saying, like, if you help me, I will give you what you desire. And that's how he corrupts him. And then Grima goes back to Rohan. And as I say, he just starts acting as a bad counsellor. But because he was already such a well-renowned counsellor, Theoden still listens to him. There is a little bit of Saruman's magic in there, but it's just nowhere near as extreme as the film.
And then why isn't Grima killed when his betrayal is known?
Well, I think that's, again, Tolkien's own personal beliefs. Grima's given the option of either staying with the Rohirrim and riding into battle with them to prove that actually he properly repents, or exile, and he chooses exile. And so again, that's just, you'd have to ask Tolkien, why not kill Grima? It makes complete sense for the story, but Grima lives, and then Grima does other things that are quite key later on. So I personally think that's just Tolkien's personal belief. There isn't really a law reason why he's spared. I mean, they take some sort of pity on him because he used to be an honourable son of Rohan. So it's almost like they're saying, we won't kill you because you did serve us properly at one time, and that's why you've got exile or fight. But again, realistically, they would have just killed him.
But then, sorry, excuse me, that might be then down to Tolkien himself in the fact that he doesn't like outright murder.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that.
Because I don't think there is any death in the books that isn't like part of a battle or because they're being attacked or...
Well, not in the Lord of the Rings, no, but the Silmarillion and the other books are filled with darkness.
Yeah, but that's from evil people that would be perceived as evil, isn't it?
Yes and no. Like, Turin's a greyish character. He's not pure evil. He kills a lot of people. I think that's much too much of a topic to talk about here, particularly because you've not read the Silmarillion.
I haven't read the Silmarillion.
So,
well, that's
there are
but
darkness.
The Lord of the Rings came
Tolkien
first before didn't they?
Well, it's yes and no. The world. Well, no. Again, yeah, no. We don't need to go into that, but Lord of the Rings is the most complete story. That and The Hobbit. That's all we shall say. But there is other darkness in Tolkien's works, so. It's not always pure.
I just meant that maybe at the time of him writing Lord of the Rings, I don't know whether he was still...
I mean, we're probably reading way too much into it, and it's just Grima served Rohan at one point, so they decided they wouldn't kill him.
Yep. What's that from? You probably haven't seen the film.
I don't know.
If anyone has, and they know where that's from... Well, no one will, because I haven't done it justice. So I'm just going to move on. Where's Helms Deep in relation to Edoras?
Eridas. It's southwest of it, but you'll need a picture to show that.
No, but I mean, like, for example, how long did they travel for when they had to go? Like, was it like a day's travel, or was it like 2 days travel, or?
It's a little under a day's travel from Edoras, and it's west of Edoras, not southwest. Sorry, but that's again another point in the book. The civilians don't go to Edoras. Theoden plans to meet Isengard in the field. He rides out to meet him, and he is diverted back to Edoras as part of the story goes on. So then the plan was never to shift all the civilians there. The film does that again so that they can then have the Warg scene. But that's about it. In the book, Theoden just musters his army. He rides out. Gandalf's with him. And they're diverted to Edoras when they realise they can't win out on the field. And that the fords of the Isen, because that's where they're going. They're heading to the fords of the Isen, which is the river that runs down from Isengard, and it separates Rohan from Isengard. And Theoden's plan is, let's get to the river, we can hold them. And then as they're riding towards it, they're then told that the river's already fallen and the orcs are streaming in, and Theoden then thinks, right, let's divert to Edoras, to Helm's Deep, and we'll try and hold them there. And then, so that's what actually happens.
So you've kind of answered my next question, which was why do they choose it?
Yeah, they choose it because it's Rohan's strongest fortress. It defends against Isengard. Isengard will have to attack and take it, particularly if the king is there, so they can hold and defend there. And also, it's a renowned fortress. It was built by the Númenóreans, and it's a strong defensive location.
Why was Aragorn raised in Rivendell?
Because his father died when he was very young, killed in the Etten Moors in the north up there, in Rhudaur. And so he was taken to Rivendell by his mother, and then she eventually died as well, and then he carried on being raised by the elves.
How did his father die?
By trolls. Killed by trolls.
What was he doing?
Attacking trolls. Walking through the woods. Who knows? But he was killed by trolls. He was almost certainly leading a raiding party or a scouting party or something. He wouldn't have just been wandering in the Etten Moors, but that's where he dies.
What is the Etten Moors?
Just
where
a
Ettins
location.
Are. No. They're different. You don't have Ettins in.
No, but the Etten Moors is a location known for trolls. So trolls do live there. So maybe Etten is a word that could mean troll or Etten. But it's Etten with an E, not Etin with an I.
How many Dunedain are left during the War of the Ring?
Hardly any, like less than 100. They're a really, really, really small band. And they do come to Aragorn in the books, which they don't in the films. And there's only about 30 of them. They're called the Grey Company. But I think there's about 100 all told. Like, they're really next to nothing. They really are like individuals that just wander the wilds. They're really, really stripped of their glory.
Is Helms Deep manned when it's not being used as a defensive position?
Yes, it is. Yeah, there's a constant garrison kept there, and in the books, in the time of the books, the commander of the garrison is called Erkenbrand, and he actually is the one, because even though he's the commander, he then goes out to the field. So, in the book, he is the one that Gandalf goes and gets. So in the film, it's Éomer because Éomer's been banished, but that doesn't really happen. In the book, Gandalf goes and musters Rohirrim, who are just out in the countryside that were scattered. When Isengard took the river, the Rohirric force was scattered. Gandalf goes and finds them. Erkenbrand is their commander. He's the lord of that whole area, and thereby commander of the garrison of Helm's Deep. And then that's what Gandalf brings back. So that's how they defend it, really. The statue is of Helm Hammerhand, who is a famous Rohirrim king who was killed at Helm's Deep. He wasn't killed; he died, is a better word. He was killed in the winter, in the snow, by a Dunlending siege. And so but he survived against all the odds, and he's really famous for being incredibly powerful, like physically. And his story is like a heroic death kind of story. So he's honoured, and the location is now named after him. But it wasn't called that before. It was known as the Hornburg for a long time. And then, it takes the Helm's name after Helm Hammerhand.
I feel like they called it the Hornburg at some point in the film.
Well, the Hornburg is the name of the actual keep, and then Helm's Deep is the name of the sort of geographical cleft in the mountains that it's in. And there's also what's called Helm's Dyke in front of Helm's Deep, which is just a wall of mud. Well, it's not really. A dike is a dip, so it's like a ditch. And that's the first defensive point. But again, the film cuts that out because you would. It's just too much detail, really.
Are the Númenóreans hardier than normal humans, or do they just live longer?
No, they are, as I mentioned earlier, humans plus. So they live longer, they've got better eyesight, they're more intelligent, they're stronger, they're taller. They're just better than humans in all ways. But by the time of the Third Age, the Dunedain are a much lesser version of Númenóreans, because Númenor, they've been gone for 3,000 years at this point. Well, 2,900, sorry. No, the War of the Rings in 1319. So, yeah, 3,000 years. So the Dunedain are a much lesser version of Númenóreans, but they're still better than normal humans. Like the Rohirrim. The Rohirrim are normal humans.
How does choosing to be human for elves work? Is it a gradual process, or is it like a sudden, like, oh no, I'm feeling weaker because I've got no immortality left?
So that question suggests that all elves have that ability, but they don't. It's Elrond, it's Arwen, it's Elladan, it's Elrohir, and that's it.
That's it.
And Elros. That's it. And the process is not ever really properly defined. So anything I say will just be my own thoughts on it. Like, there's no set outcome. As I said last time in the first video, it's the general consensus that I've seen in forums online is that Arwen becomes human when she finally marries Aragorn. But Elladan and Elrohir just choose Elven, and that's it, and then they're elves. So there's no information on that, I'm afraid.
Why does Elrond stay on Middle-earth?
Well, he coordinates till all of the elves have gone. He's one of the most important elves in Middle-earth at this point. And in fact, he would be the High King of the Noldorian exile if he'd chosen to take that title, but he didn't choose to, so he's not. But he has the right to be. So he just stays. Of course he would. He's a good leader.
Is there a head Ent? There you go. There's my last Ent question. Is Treebeard?
Yes. He's not really a king of the Ents. He's just the Ent we know the most about because he's the main in the story.
I didn't say king. I think I.
But well, no, you said head. But like
leader.
There isn't really he commands the most respect, but he's not an actual leader.
Can all Ents speak whatever the tongue of Middle-earth is?
No.
Just him?
No, there is another one, again, the book that Merry and Pippin meet in the book, and he talks to them. I can't remember his name because, I'm sorry, I don't really like Ents. I think they're a bit boring. Oh. But there is one other Ent that we do see a lot more in the book, but in the film they cut him out completely. And so other Ents can talk, but not all of them can. No.
Do the elves have battles between each other?
They do, but only 3 times. Very famously, only 3 times. And they're called kinslayings because they're so rare. And they're all perpetuated by Feanor or Feanor's children in pursuit of the Silmarils. So he kills some elves to steal some boats. And then there are 2 more kinslayings where they kill elves to try and steal Silmarils. And both times they fail. And but that's the only time elves ever fight elves.
It was just a comment that we made when we were watching the film, not you. Those of us who are amateurs, I guess, of Lord of the Rings. And we were making a comment on the fact that the hobbits always seem to have their shots on target. And is this an actual thing, or is that just for the film?
I mean, it's just for the film. Hobbits are naturally gifted archers, so their accuracy is a little bit better. They've got good eyesight, I suppose. They have good eyesight, so I suppose they would be more on target. But I don't think the film is doing like, oh yeah, hobbits are actually really accurate. We should show that in some way. And instead, I think it's just, let's have Merry and Pippin throw some stones.
Okay. But it's just because they always... Yeah, okay. That's fair. I suppose it'd be boring if they missed every shot.
Well, yeah, you're not going to have your heroes miss throwing stones, are you?
No.
That would be rubbish.
Well, that was my last questions. There weren't as many questions for the 2 towers.
That's all right.
So, a bit of a short one, I guess.
Well, so that is indeed all of the questions. If you have a question, post it down in the comments below and we'll either answer it, or if it's particularly pertinent, we won't, because we're about to record the next episode. So we'll answer it with the keyboard. But otherwise, do let us know your thoughts. But for now, that's the end of number 2, the 2 towers. So do stay tuned for what will potentially be the penultimate video on the channel in its history before I finally leave you all for good. But that's the 2 towers, so thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. And until we speak again, dear friends, Navair Naden Pedimad Melunin.
And farewell.
And farewell.